In a school filled with racism, a black kid is bullied every day until one moment changes everything. When he finally stands up against racism, what happens next shocks the entire school. The cafeteria hums with conversation, laughter, and the occasional clatter of trays. It's just another lunchtime at Ridgeway High, until it isn't. Jason, the new black student, walks cautiously through the rows of occupied tables, his lunch tray balanced in one hand. He's only been at this school for a few weeks, but he already understands the unspoken hierarchy. The popular kids dominate the best seats, while everyone else knows their place. Unfortunately, today, he's about to become a spectacle. As Jason passes one of the central tables, Bryce, the self-proclaimed king of the school, leans back in his chair with a smug grin. His friends, Matt, Logan, and Connor, watch eagerly. Bryce's foot shoots out, catching Jason's ankle. It's subtle enough to seem accidental, but intentional enough that Jason stumbles. His tray tilts forward, and in a horrifying instant, food splatters onto the cafeteria floor. The sound echoes louder than it should. Silence. Then laughter. "Oops," Bryce drawls, shaking his head with exaggerated pity. "Clumsy much?" Jason straightens, inhaling slowly. His hands clench at his sides, but his expression remains unreadable. He doesn't look at Bryce. Instead, he kneels, methodically picking up the ruined food. The laughter grows louder. "Hey!" Bryce calls, his voice laced with mockery. "I'm talking to you!" Jason still doesn't respond. Annoyed by the lack of reaction, Bryce stands up. He strides over, looming over Jason as the cafeteria watches with rapt attention. "What? You think you're better than me?" Jason finally looks up, his gaze calm, assessing. "No." Bryce smirks, thinking he's won. "That's what I thought." Jason wipes his hands on his jeans and rises to his feet. He steps close, voice barely above a whisper. "I just don't waste my breath on cowards." The cafeteria collectively gasps. Bryce's smug expression falters for a split second before he recovers, his jaw tightening. "What did you just say?" Jason tilts his head slightly. "You heard me." Bryce's face darkens, his fists twitching at his sides. But before he can retaliate, a teacher's voice cuts through the tension. "Everything okay over here?" Bryce exhales sharply, masking his anger with a forced chuckle. "Yeah, we were just welcoming the new kid." The teacher eyes him suspiciously, but doesn't push further. Jason doesn't say another word. He simply picks up his tray and walks away. But as he does, Bryce mutters under his breath, "You're gonna regret that." Jason hears it. He just doesn't care. Because what Bryce doesn't know, what no one here knows, is that Jason isn't just some quiet kid. He's been training in martial arts since he was 6, and if Bryce keeps pushing, he's about to learn that the hard way. Jason moved to Ridgeway High from Chicago with his mom, hoping for a fresh start. Life back home had been tough, filled with struggles his mother was desperate to leave behind. His father, a military veteran, had trained him in martial arts since he was a kid, not to fight, but to build discipline and confidence. "Strength isn't about hurting people," his father always said. "It's about knowing you don't have to." But Ridgeway wasn't the kind of place where quiet strength was respected. The school was overwhelmingly white, and Jason immediately noticed the casual racism that lingered in the hallways. Teachers turned a blind eye. Students followed an unspoken social order. And at the top of that hierarchy was Bryce, the privileged golden boy who treated the school like his personal kingdom. Jason wasn't interested in challenging anyone. He kept his head down, stayed quiet, and focused on making it through the day. But bullies don't like silence. The more Jason ignored Bryce and his crew, the worse they pushed. Bryce started small, mocking Jason in class, whispering insults under his breath, making sure everyone knew Jason didn't belong. When that didn't get a reaction, it escalated, shoving him in the halls, knocking over his books. Bryce lived for the attention, and humiliating Jason became his new favorite game. The only person who seemed to care was Lily, a quiet girl who had seen Bryce ruin plenty of lives before. She warned Jason, her voice low but urgent. "Bryce won't stop until you break." Jason heard her, but he also knew something Bryce didn't. He wasn't the one who would break. He had spent years training, learning control. He knew exactly what he was capable of, and he refused to let someone like Bryce drag him down to his level. But Bryce didn't see Jason's silence as restraint. He saw it as weakness, and now he was determined to prove a point. Mewing, their confidence wavering. This wasn't going how they expected. Jason wasn't scared. He wasn't even flinching. Bryce clenches his jaw, trying to shake the unease creeping up his spine. He's used to kids begging, cowering, running away. But Jason, he just stands there, unshaken, his eyes locked on Bryce's like he's already won. One of Bryce's lackeys, Logan, shifts uncomfortably. Bryce, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Bryce snaps, his pride boiling over. He steps forward again, this time grabbing Jason by the collar. "You think you're tough?" he spits. "Think you're better than me?" Jason exhales slowly, his muscles coiled but controlled. "I think you're insecure," he replies evenly. Bryce's face flushes red. He cocks his fist back and swings, hard. But Jason moves like water. He sidesteps smoothly, Bryce's momentum carrying him off balance. He stumbles, barely catching himself against the lockers. Laughter ripples through the group, hesitant but real. Bryce straightens, his fists shaking. "You think this is funny?" he barks. Jason doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. His calm, steady presence is answer enough. Bryce roars in frustration and lunges again, this time throwing a flurry of wild punches. Jason dodges every single one, weaving effortlessly, never retaliating. He's not fighting. He's demonstrating control. And that's when it happens. Bryce swings recklessly, and Jason steps aside at just the right moment. Bryce slams full force into a locker, his shoulder hitting metal with a loud clang. He gasps, stumbling back, pain flashing across his face. The room goes dead silent. Jason takes a slow step forward, his voice low but powerful. "I don't need to fight you, Bryce. You already beat yourself." Bryce glares, his chest rising and falling rapidly. But he doesn't move. He can't. And for the first time in his life, Bryce isn't the one in control. Bryce smirks as he steps into the center of the gym, microphone in hand. The bleachers are packed. Students, teachers, even the principal watching curiously. Bryce's voice echoes through the gym, dripping with mockery. "All right, everyone. We've got a special event today. Our new friend Jason here has been feeling a little out of place. So we figured we'd welcome him properly, with a friendly little sparring match." Laughter ripples through the crowd. Jason, standing off to the side, exhales slowly. He knows exactly what this is. A setup. A final attempt to break him. But Bryce doesn't know who he's dealing with. Jason looks over at Lily in the crowd. She's shaking her head, mouthing, "Don't do it." But Jason knows there's no walking away from this, not without making things worse. So he steps forward. Bryce grins wide. "That's the spirit. Let's see what you've got." Jason pulls his hoodie over his head, tossing it to the side. And that's when the energy in the gym shifts. The murmurs start instantly. His t-shirt clings to his athletic frame, his shoulders broad, his arms toned with muscle. But it's not just that. There's something about the way he moves, the way he rolls his shoulders, the measured way he breathes. He isn't nervous. He's composed, focused. From the sidelines, the wrestling coach furrows his brows, sitting forward in his seat. "Hold on," he mutters. His eyes lock onto Jason's stance, feet planted just right, hands loose but ready, shoulders relaxed. His eyes widen. "Wait, that's a trained fighter." Bryce doesn't hear it. He's too busy hyping up the crowd. "Let's go, new kid. Show us what you got." The whistle blows. Bryce lunges, throwing a wild punch aimed at Jason's face. But Jason's gone. Not literally, but it feels like it. In a blink, he's sidestepped, barely shifting his weight, effortlessly avoiding the hit. Bryce stumbles forward, momentarily confused. Another punch. Another miss. Bryce grunts in frustration, swinging faster, harder. Jason doesn't even flinch. He moves like a shadow, fluid and untouchable. The gym grows quieter with each failed hit. Bryce's breaths turn ragged. He's getting frustrated, desperate. Jason finally speaks, his voice even, calm. "You never had control, Bryce." Bryce scowls, throwing everything he has into one last reckless charge. And then it happens. Jason moves faster than anyone can process. His footwork is effortless. His hands grip Bryce's arm, redirecting his weight in a perfectly executed takedown. 1 second, Bryce is standing. The next, he's flat on his back, staring at the ceiling. Silence. The entire gym is frozen. Jason steps back, hands still at his sides. You only had fear. And for the first time in his life, Bryce knows what it feels like. Bryce scrambles to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and rage. The stunned silence in the gym is deafening. He looks around at the crowd, faces frozen in shock, some whispering, some grinning, others exchanging glances that say everything he fears. Jason doesn't smirk. He doesn't gloat. He simply picks up his hoodie and walks away, as if nothing happened. That stings more than anything. Bryce clenches his fists, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His entire reputation, years of control, of dominance, crumbles in a matter of seconds. He looks toward his friends, expecting support, but even they look uncertain. Logan avoids eye contact. Connor scratches the back of his neck. The murmurs spread like wildfire. Did you see that? Bryce got wrecked. Jason didn't even throw a punch. Bryce feels the walls closing in. He storms out of the gym, shoving past anyone in his way. By lunchtime, the entire school is talking about it. Jason is no longer just the new kid. He's something more. Not a victim, not a pushover. He didn't just survive Bryce's bullying, he turned it inside out. Some students who once laughed at Bryce's jokes now nod at Jason in the halls. Others openly whisper when Bryce walks by, no longer afraid of him. For the first time in his life, Bryce isn't in control, and he's furious. That night, Bryce sits in his father's home office, fists clenched. His father, Richard Calloway, a well-connected businessman with friends on the school board, watches him with a measured expression. You embarrassed yourself, Richard says coolly. You let a nobody humiliate you. Bryce seethes. He made me look weak. I want him gone. His father exhales, tapping his fingers on his desk. Consider it handled. The next morning, Jason is called to the principal's office. He already knows what's coming. Mr. Dalton, the principal, shifts uncomfortably in his chair. Jason, we have a situation. Jason sits back, arms crossed. Let me guess. I'm being punished. Mr. Dalton sighs. The Calloways are very influential in this community. They've lodged a complaint. You're suspended for 3 days. Jason blinks. For what? For instigating violence. Jason lets out a breath of disbelief. I didn't touch him. Mr. Dalton looks apologetic, but his hands are tied. It's not about what happened. It's about how it looked. Jason shakes his head. So because Bryce lost, I get punished. Mr. Dalton doesn't answer. Lily is furious. She storms into the library where Jason sits, slamming her bag down on the table. This isn't about fighting, she says, eyes blazing. It's about power, and you just took his away. Jason exhales. And now they're trying to take mine. Lily grins. Not if we fight back. She holds up a petition form. Let's make some noise. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the pavement as Jason walks out of school, his backpack slung over one shoulder. The weight of his 3-day suspension lingers, but he doesn't let it bother him. He knows the truth. So does the school. As he steps past the gate, a familiar figure emerges from the side of the building. Bryce. But something is different. He's alone. No Matt. No Logan. No Connor. Just him. Jason stops, watching as Bryce steps forward, fists clenched. His face is twisted in something between desperation and fury. You ruined everything, Bryce hisses. His voice isn't as sharp as before. It's unsteady, wavering. I had respect. I had control. Now, because of you, I have nothing. Jason tilts his head. I didn't take anything from you, Bryce. You lost it yourself. Bryce grits his teeth. Shut up. He swings, a wild, reckless punch, fueled by pure frustration. Jason barely moves. His arm comes up, blocking it with ease. Bryce stumbles back, panting. He swings again, and Jason catches his wrist mid-air. Their eyes lock. Jason doesn't squeeze. He doesn't push. He simply holds Bryce there, completely in control. Bryce struggles for a second, then stops. His breathing is heavy, his chest rising and falling in rapid bursts. Jason takes a step closer, his voice calm. "I don't need to hurt you." He leans in, his next words barely above a whisper. "You've already lost." Bryce flinches. His body sags slightly, as if the truth of Jason's words finally weighs on him. And then, in the distance, sirens. Bryce stiffens. Jason doesn't have to turn around to know what's happening. Lily's been busy. Over the past few days, they uncovered financial records, bribery trails, corruption linked straight back to Richard Calloway. Lily leaked everything. Bryce follows Jason's gaze toward the street, where a fleet of black and white squad cars pull up. Officers step out. A suited agent in dark sunglasses walks toward the school entrance, speaking into a radio. And then, another car arrives. This time, a sleek black luxury sedan. Bryce's face turns pale as his father steps out, flanked by two police officers. Richard Calloway barely has time to adjust his cufflinks before he's approached by the authorities. His expression flickers from annoyance to alarm as one of the officers reads him his rights. Handcuffs click into place. The entire school watches in stunned silence. Teachers, students, even the principal stands at the doorway, frozen. Bryce stares, his mouth slightly open. He steps back, shaking his head as if denying reality itself. No, this isn't happening. Jason doesn't say anything, because he doesn't have to. Bryce turns toward Jason, his hands shaking. His father is being placed in the back of a police car. Everything he thought gave him power, his name, his money, his reputation, is disintegrating before his eyes. And Jason is still standing, unbroken. Bryce takes one last shuddering breath. Then, without another word, he turns and walks away, his world falling apart behind him. Jason exhales, watching the last remnants of Bryce's kingdom crumble. And with that, it's over. Jason walks through the halls of Ridgeway High, and for the first time, he isn't invisible. Whispers used to follow him, mocking, dismissive. Now, it's different. Students nod at him in quiet respect. Some even offer small smiles, the same people who once laughed when Bryce tormented him. His suspension had sparked an uproar. Lily's petition, backed by teachers and students alike, reached the school board in record time. Coupled with the news of Bryce's father's corruption and arrest, the administration had no choice but to reinstate Jason. Principal Dalton, looking more uncomfortable than ever, called him into his office that morning. "We may have acted too quickly in your case," Dalton admitted, avoiding Jason's eyes. "After careful review, your record will remain clean." Jason didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The fact that Dalton had been forced to backtrack was enough. Now, as he moves through the hallways, he feels the weight of everything that's changed. The fear Bryce once controlled is gone. His so-called friends, they've distanced themselves. The crowd that once cheered for him now whispers about his downfall. Bryce is alone. Jason spots him by the lockers, standing in the space he once ruled. The same place where he used to mock Jason, push him, humiliate him. But now Bryce just looks lost. His eyes flick up and meet Jason's. For a second, something flickers there. Defensiveness, resentment, maybe. But beneath that, Jason sees something else. Recognition. Jason stops in front of him, tilting his head slightly. Bryce stiffens but doesn't speak. His shoulders are tense, like he's expecting another blow. But Jason doesn't hit back, not physically, not with words. Instead, he exhales and says, "You thought power was about breaking people." His voice is steady, measured. It's not. Real strength is knowing when you don't have to fight. Bryce flinches like the words land harder than a punch ever could. For the first time in his life, Bryce has no comeback. Jason watches as Bryce swallows hard, nods slightly, almost imperceptibly, then turns and walks away, his head lower than before. Jason doesn't watch him go for long. He's already looking forward, moving past it all, because he won, not just against Bryce, but against the cycle itself. The school feels different now. Jason walks through the halls, and for the first time, he's not an outsider. Not because he fought, not because he won a battle, but because he changed how people saw strength. Lily catches up to him at his locker, a knowing smile on her face. So, does it feel like you won? Jason glances around. The whispers that once followed him are gone. The fear Bryce controlled is gone. Even Bryce himself, no longer untouchable, no longer feared, just another student moving through the crowd. Jason exhales, his expression thoughtful. I didn't win, he says. I just stopped losing. Lily nods, understanding exactly what he means. The bell rings. Students shuffle to class. Life moves on. Jason closes his locker and walks forward, head high, step steady. The screen fades to black.